Also going to share to the Facebook. 1 second. This always takes a minute. I will also have it on speaker view as I'm streaming, just so it doesn't show everyone on the screen, just who is talking. So that's another thing. You don't have to worry about being up on the stream. And it's almost ready. Okay, going live. Great, we should be good to go. So, all right, hello everyone. My name is Olivia and I am the coordinator of the Human Nature series at Shavers Creek. We are back today with the second session of the Human Nature series. And I'm here with 2 interns that are on my team, so I'm going to give them a second to go ahead and introduce themselves as well. So Megan and Allison, whichever one of you want to go first, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Megan. I'm an environmental education intern at Shavers Creek and helping out with the Human Nature series.
Thank you, Megan.
Good morning, I'm Allison and I'm also an environmental education intern at Shavers Creek and happy to be here and be part of the Human Nature series this season.
Great. Yeah, so Megan and Allison will be on the call today to help out with some of our questions. So I want to go over a couple of Zoom functions really quick. We won't be using too many, but if you haven't used Zoom before, it would be helpful to know how to use it. So at the top of your screen, you should see an icon that says chat. So if you want to open the chat box, it should be on the right side of your screen. And in that chat box, you can write any questions that you want throughout that session in that box on Zoom. And Allison will be watching the chat box on Zoom, just pulling out any questions that we definitely want to touch on or get to during our question and answer session. And Megan will be watching the comments on the Facebook Live. So if you are watching on Facebook Live and have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments and Megan will bring those into the room so we could ask our guests that as well. But so during the session, you can put your questions in the chat box, but we won't get to the questions until after the presentations from both of our guests. So we'll have a presentation from Dan and a presentation from Drew, and then we'll have questions for both of them after that. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat box if you just kind of as taking notes and reminders of what you want to ask during that question and answer session. And then during that session, we might call out to you and be like, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question out loud. If you prefer that we read that question, just go ahead and write it in with your question that you would prefer us to ask it instead of you ask it out loud, and we will do that for you. Great, so that's all the Zoom functions that we need for now. There might be a few later that we can touch on, but just worry about the chat box for now. You might have noticed that when you came into the room that your microphone was muted. That was intentional, just so we don't have a lot of background noise. So if you don't mind, keep yourself muted for now. And like I said, at the end, when we're talking or when we're doing the questions, we can ask you to unmute yourself, but then mute yourself after you are done speaking, just so we don't have all of that noise. Great, so then we should be good to get started. So I just want to do a quick intro of the Human Nature series itself. So I started the series last year with the mission in mind to bridge the gap between our health and the natural world. There are so many health benefits that we can get from simply being out in nature and being active in nature. So having people recognize those and take advantage of those, while also building a love for our environment, which leads to environmental stewardship on our part. So the Human Nature series this season is a little bit different since we are going virtual. but we were able to do that with some of our partners. So Clearwater Conservancy is here with us today. Dan will talk a little bit about Clearwater Conservancy in a minute, but they're one of our partners for the Human Nature series. We have also partnered with Webster's Bookstore and Cafe, which is a local independent bookstore here in State College. They just started an online store during this virtual time. So if you're looking to buy any new books or used books, you can go to Webster's Bookstore Cafe online. I will link their website at the end of the session so you can go right to that. And we might have a couple of books come up throughout the session that you can buy right from Webster's, so you can do that. We have also partnered with Purple Lizard Maps that has made a ton of incredible maps for around the area in Pennsylvania and a few other states as well. And they've also been posting out on Facebook of different areas that you can go to participate in outdoor recreation that might be a little bit less crowded. So it aligns great with our workshop today of responsible recreation. Yeah, so our topic today, we just wanted to have a quick conversation about how we can participate in outdoor recreation activities during this time of social distancing. I know that everyone wants to get outside and enjoy, especially the nice weather that we've been having recently, but that has led to a lot of crowded trailheads or seeing a lot more people outside. So we want to explore how to do that responsibly, and also maybe talk about the activities that we should be taking advantage of, maybe some that we should be a little bit more careful while doing. So just a conversation about all of that and how to be responsible and stewards of the earth while we are doing that as well. So to participate in that conversation, we have two guests with us today. Like I said, we have Dan Trew from Clearwater Conservancy that will talk about the work that they're doing over there with their Centered Outdoors program. And we also have our very own Drew Leonard. He works at Shavers Creek with me. He is the assistant director for our Aurora Outdoor Orientation program, but he is also a Leave No Trace master educator. So he's going to talk a little bit about the Leave No Trace principles and how we can be outdoors responsibly during this time. So just a quick note on our format. Like I said, we will have a presentation from both Dan and Drew, and then we will go into a question and answer portion. And then if we have time, we might have a little bit of discussion, so questions that we have for you that we can talk about. You can turn on your mics and share your thoughts as well. Yeah, like I said, as we're going through, just go ahead and put your questions in the question box, and we'll get to that during the question and answer session. All right, that is enough from me. I am going to turn it over to our first guest, Dan Trew. Dan, if you want to start with a more thorough introduction of yourself and Clearwater Conservancy, and then go ahead and get started on your content as well.
Certainly. Thank you, Olivia. So my name, as you just heard, is Dan Trew. I am the adventure coordinator for the Clearwater Conservancy of Central Pennsylvania. That is our full official legal title. We have pretty much a vested interest in the outreach and education of our community. It's part of our mission statement. We are basically a land trust here in Central Pennsylvania, in the heart of Pennsylvania. We focus mostly on land conservation and stewardship of those lands. So that could be riparian buffers, so areas next to streams, conservation easements, so protecting land from development or other kind of changes to it as threats approach it, and also outreach and education, which is where I come in. Yay, woohoo. So I do all of our fun outdoorsy programming. So my title is the appropriate adventure coordinator. Yes, it's a great title. No, you can't have it. It is mine. As the adventure coordinator, what I do is primarily focus on the outdoor education component. So that could be the Centered Outdoors program, which has to go and undergo some changes this year. We can't really do live in-person gatherings of tons of people like we had in the past. We also do our Adventures in Conservation series, which are kind of more focused and more narrowed in onto exactly what we do. So that could be everything from our vernal pools tour, where we take people out and show them the life cycles of various amphibians in the Scotia Barrens. It could also be paddling adventures. So we partner with Tussey Mountain Outfitters and take people on paddling adventures to like Bald Eagle Lake or Black Moshannon, and cover some of the more interesting kind of natural history components and kind of human history components that would be present there at those locations. So those are really the primary kind of focuses that I take in. As you can imagine, using the off-turn phrase now more than ever, that you see that everywhere now, we had to refocus and kind of reform how our programs were developed. We can't really drag people out into the outdoors right now in large groups. That's kind of dangerous. So we had to kind of refactor how we approach our outdoor education. And the kind of first wave that we came up with was these kind of weekly newsletter and blog things that would cover topics that we would have been covering already in part of our adventures series. So if you go to clearwaterconservancy.org/blog, and I'll throw that in the chat there so you can go and check that out at your leisure. But our blog right now has 9 different articles in it covering different things that we would have been talking about throughout the year. And it's kind of topic focused, everything from amphibians to mammals, flowers to trees, the whole 9 yards. We're focusing weekly adventure series on those. And that blog kind of dives in pretty deep into those topics. So for example, the summer birding, or the spring birding one rather, covered a bunch of different species that you would expect to see kind of at your feeder or kind of flitting in and about trees and whatnot as you're out and exploring. And that's kind of the focus that we wanted to take with it. The ability to give people these topics and kind of ideas that we would have been talking about while they're already exploring areas, and kind of generalize it. When we first started out, we thought, oh, we'll feature some locations and kind of, weekly ideas to get them to explore specific locations like the Scotia Barrens access on the north end, or, the Musser Gap Trail. But we got some feedback from both DCNR and, just kind of general people that the trailheads were becoming overcrowded. That was not something that we had foreseen when this all kicked off. So we refocused that idea and shifted from those, we're going to talk about this specific location and the things that you would see there, to more broadly appeal to people so that, if they were to go to the trailhead at the Scotia Barrens and find that it was full of cars, they could go to another location and get the same kind of experience and the same kind of topics that would be covered there. So those were the big kind of forming decisions that we had at the very onset. And it was kind of a learning process as we moved along, trying to get those kind of initial gears turning to figure out how we were going to format all of the different components that had to come together. We ended up coming with a pretty solid week-to-week plan now. So our weekly adventure series, which is an e-news, if you will, covers the same topics more or less that we would cover in the blog. So the blogs are featured as part of those kind of weekly newsletters. And those weekly newsletters also have family-friendly activities and indoor activities that you can do with kids or other family members, so that you're not, just cooped up in your house all day. You have fun activities related to the topic. Kind of creates that experiential learning component that we really like to emphasize with some of our outdoor activities. So those are the fun kind of add-ins that we have in there. We also toyed with some photo competitions and things like that to try and get people engaged and involved. So we feature weekly a picture that people have submitted to us, and then we credit them and they get their little picture in the top of the email. And we also do kind of general advice as well in there for kind of recreating in the outdoors. So when DCNR first came out with their basically guidelines for how to, recreate responsibly in the outdoors, especially in the kind of more crowded areas, we have those kind of guidelines laid out in there as pretty much part of every email. And those ones you can find pretty much anywhere, either on the blog. So the blog link will take you there. There's also a couple links that will take you to sign up as well to get those weekly emails. They're ongoing, and they're part of the continuation of the Centered Outdoors program. So moving into that Centered Outdoors program area, originally we had 50 different hikes scheduled throughout the summer. So you can imagine, we had to basically pull all those off the schedule and rethink how we were going to feature those locations. And as we moved through it, we had a couple of different sites that had kind of cool, interesting things that they could feature. But we really wanted to see what we could do to kind of re-engage our populations that we would normally be hitting. So those people that maybe are not super comfortable with going outside. They maybe have, you know, 1 or 2 adventures under their belt, but they don't really know where to go yet. They don't know what to bring. So it's more of that kind of, we take the hard parts out for you and let you enjoy the outdoors in ways that, you know, you didn't know that you could. So, for example, one of the biggest questions we get at Centered Outdoors, which surprises me, is, will I see snakes and will there be bears? You know, you don't, you know, if you're a seasoned outdoors person, you're like, I've never seen a snake in, you know, 20 years of hiking in state college. Why would I see one now? And then you realize that's a real cognitive process for people that are debating on whether or not they want to go outdoors and want to, you know, go up the, you know, mountain mist trail, for example. Will they see a rattlesnake on that? And what do they do if they see one? So those are things that, you know, as you've been experienced, you don't really think about and you know how to handle just intuitively. But for someone new, those are the important things that we're looking at to kind of re-engage them and make it easier for them. So as we move through the Centered Outdoors season, we're focusing more on the topics again than we are on the specific sites, again, to kind of ease that issue of people all going to the same place at the same time and kind of feature those topics. So our current website is a little rejiggered from what it would have been if you would have been visiting it, you know, 2 months ago or so. And then I will post our Centered Outdoors website in the chat. There you go. So you can visit that at your leisure as well. The Centered Outdoors website right now has kind of a, what I would like to call a Wikipedia-esque topic and site layout. So you can go in and find, say you're really interested in old growth trees. So you go and you drill down into the old growth trees in our topics section. You're looking at locations where you can find old growth trees. And you go, say, to Alan Seeger, and you click on the lovely little Alan Seeger site link. And then you get a whole series of other things that you can find at Alan Seeger. So if you're planning that trip to go there, you can see kind of outlined more or less what those locations feature. So you can see that they feature not only just old growth trees, but kind of that early Pennsylvania habitat and culture that surrounds the area. And you can also find specific mammals or specific birds that you're looking for. So that's kind of the objective that we have, is that, you know, instead of leading people there, we give them an idea of what they expect to see and kind of the topics that we would talk about if we were there, so they can learn a little bit about those locations as they go to them. And then kind of as we were exploring, DCNR has been continually updating their kind of policies and procedures for getting people outdoors. Over the past week, a lot has changed. As the guidance from the governor's office has come out with those, you know, yellow and green and red zones that we're becoming more and more familiar with. They've been opening up more facilities and parks. When we started this process, pretty much everything was closed in terms of facilities and kind of general public spaces. Trails were open, but you couldn't really go to a pavilion. You couldn't go into a restroom. So those were the kind of challenges that we had to navigate. And when we were advising people to go out, especially telling them, you know, don't go more than 15 minutes, go before you go kind of ideas, so that when you got there, you didn't find, oh, all the restrooms are closed, I can't go to the bathroom. Those were the kinds of things we wanted to make sure that people were aware of. Now DCNR has a beautiful kind of facilities map that they've published, which shows kind of how things are opening up, what activities are available at which sites, and gives kind of a rough timeline of when specific things are opening up. So for example, tent camping in a lot of state parks in the center area is opening up next week. Huntington County still is technically in the red, so everything down there is still technically closed. But as things move along, they give kind of projected updates and date and time frames of when things might start opening up and what facilities at state parks are opening up. But that is essentially the directions that we're heading with the Centered Outdoors program. It's new and exciting and all these cool and wonderful things, and the directions that we're heading are kind of fascinating. As we move forward, we're really interested in the partnerships that we can form with our groups to kind of offer more kind of interactive activities as well. So we have a couple of different sites that are offering guided tours that we can pre-record and kind of showcase some of the locations. Live streaming out in our locations is a little bit difficult. Cell phones don't really work in the middle of, you know, Alan Seeger, for example. Good and bad. It means that we can't really have a live conversation with people as we're walking. It just means we have to do a little bit of work to pre-record it and edit it. But, you know, we're excited for that kind of future possibility. And that's me for now. You'll get more of me later.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan. We're going to go to Drew in just a second. Yes, and one thing I was thinking of while, Dan, you were speaking, you shared all of these wonderful links in the chat box. So if you are interested in what Dan was saying and want to learn more about that, go ahead and check out those links. I will also be taking all of the links that we're generating from today to put the links in a Facebook page or in a Facebook post. And Megan is also sharing those links on our Facebook Live comments as well. So if you don't have the links written down, don't worry, they will be showing up on our Facebook and on the Facebook Live stream. But thank you, Dan, for sharing all that information. There's some really exciting stuff happening over at Clearwater Conservancy. So thank you for all the work that you're doing with that. So like I said, we're going to go over to Drew now with his presentation. Make sure that you're writing down your questions or putting them in the chat box for both of them as you're listening to these presentations. Like I said, after we speak to Drew, you'll have the opportunity to ask Drew questions, but also Dan, we can ask questions about the presentation that you just heard as well. So I'll turn it over to Drew to let him introduce himself a bit more and then tell us a bit about Leave No Trace.
Thanks, Olivia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Drew Leonard, and as Olivia said before, I'm the Assistant Director of the Aurora Outdoor Orientation Programs based at Shavers Creek. So for those of you who may not know what those are, we, in typical seasons, run outdoor backcountry backpacking trips for incoming Penn State students to help aid in their transition to college life, to help them build community, build relationships, things like that. And I'm also a Leave No Trace Master Educator. And so I just want to take this opportunity to sort of discuss some ideas around Leave No Trace and then how they kind of also affect how we're recreating in our current pandemic situation. And some of them are becoming more poignant than before. And so just a little bit about Leave No Trace quickly. The Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics was founded in 1994, and basically their mission is to encourage people to recreate responsibly and educate. They use education, research, and partners with various outdoor organizations to sort of promote this idea. And so quickly, I'm just going to share their main education tool is what we call the 7 principles. And so hopefully you all can see the screen that I'm sharing here. And it's just a quick listing of those principles. And you can go ahead and read through them quickly. But again, the idea is to just provide some guidance to the general public and outdoor programs and things like that on how to properly prepare for recreating in the outdoors, as well as being sure to sort of leave that area as or better than you found it when you are finished, so that other folks can enjoy it in the same way that you did, and we aren't sort of impacting the flora and fauna in those areas more than we need to. And so I'm going to kind of focus on a few of these more specifically. Again, there's a wealth of information on these topics. You can explore the Leave No Trace website, and I'll post a couple of links or give them to Olivia to put in the follow-up Facebook post. But you know, I've been on week-long courses where we dive into these ideas, and so with only just 15 minutes, I'm going to try to pick a few important topics out that are helpful to know, and then sort of connect them to our current situation. And so basically, as we've sort of covered and mentioned, in our current situation, a lot of people are sort of seeking respite in the outdoors as an escape from what we're going through right now. And some of those folks are very seasoned and some are not. And so with that sort of varying levels of experience and as Dan mentioned, the potential overcrowding of certain access areas, the Leave No Trace information is becoming more and more important to be familiar with. And so I just want to provide some insight into some of these ideas. And so I want to start just a little bit with the first principle, that plan ahead and prepare, and say that preparation is key. You know, and this is sort of, when I was thinking about this talk, I was like, well, that's sort of the theme for like anything we're doing nowadays, right? Like even if you just want to go to the grocery store, you're like, okay, what do I have to bring? I need a mask, I need hand sanitizer, like all these other things that you never thought about when you used to just, go to the grocery store to pick up some, milk and eggs or whatever you were going to get. And so when thinking about outdoor recreation, it's also very important that you think about a few things before you head out. And so traditionally, if you were planning for an outdoor recreation experience, some things you might want to think about are what the weather's going to be like, what sort of terrain or, obstacles you might encounter along the way, how long you're going to be out, how much food and water you'll need, and then access to certain facilities. As Dan mentioned, that's sort of varying across the state. And there's other things that you would want to think about before you prepare, but asking yourself these questions ahead of time will help you bring proper clothing in case of a change of weather or a summer rainstorm. It would help you have the right means to cook your meal if you're staying out overnight. And so the reason why this is important in terms of leave no trace is if you were to just go on a trip and be completely unprepared, you are more likely to negatively impact the environment. So if you were to go out on a trip and you get injured and you end up, having to stay overnight somewhere that you weren't prepared to stay, you wouldn't have a shelter, you wouldn't have proper clothing. So you might try to, make a shelter out of branches and leaves and whatever you could find around, and may have a larger impact on that natural environment around you than if you were to have brought a tarp and a rain jacket and an insulating layer and things like that. So keeping in mind that planning ahead and preparing for where you're going and what sort of activity you're engaging in is important. And then way to connect that to our current situation is thinking about the access to certain types of services that you may usually have had at local or state parks, such as bathrooms, water fountains, snack bars, things like that, where those things might now be closed and you may need to prepare in a different way to make sure that you have enough water to stay hydrated. Like Dan said, you kind of go before you go, so you don't pull into the parking lot and realize, ooh, that's what I forgot to do. And there's also, some other things that you might encounter, like certain roads may be closed. A lot of park offices are closed, and you may have been relying on that park office for a map. And so trying to find a way to find a map beforehand so that you're able to navigate your trails in the way you wanted to. And I was also going to mention that that map or the site map that Dan sent the link to, that DCNR is doing a great job of now communicating which parks and areas have which facilities and services open. So definitely check into that before you head out, so that you sort of know what you're getting yourself into. Sort of transitioning then, I'm going to jump down to principle number 2, that idea of traveling and camping on durable surfaces. So basically what this means is if you're going to be hiking or biking, stick to those designated trails rather than sort of making your way through just sort of bushwhacking through the woods and the brush. There's a few reasons why we want to do that. One of which is that trail is an already frequently used and impacted area. And if you are to leave that trail, you are more likely to negatively impact, the surrounding plants, which can also potentially be sort of homes for various creatures that live in that area. And so you would be expanding that impact across a larger swath of the forest. And so that's sort of the general reason why we're looking to do that. But now in this situation, if you were to leave the trail, get lost, potentially get injured, the means that certain organizations have to come out and sort of perform a search and rescue operation or try to help you get out of the woods if you indeed are unable to leave under your own power, the availability of those services is diminished currently. And so sort of in the vein where we're telling folks, oh, maybe this isn't the time to try some crazy new activity you've never engaged in before. Now is definitely the time you want to stick to more of those impacted, well-known trails and campsites. That way, you are more likely to be able to get out of the woods more easily if you need to. You're less likely to get lost. And if you end up in a situation where you need assistance, you're more likely to be encountered by some other hikers or folks that could render assistance. One thing I always like to touch on when thinking about this traveling camping on durable surfaces is I'm sure we've all been out hiking before and you've seen this trail that, is about, 3 feet wide and you're hiking along and it looks great. And all of a sudden you get to this point where the trail seems like it's become, like 12 feet wide, right? And maybe there's a wet, muddy spot in the middle. You see, you can see why maybe, people didn't want to walk right through that mud puddle. So let's just go around the side a little bit. Let's go around the side a little bit more and that puddle kind of expands. And so I would encourage you all to go ahead and just tromp through that mud, get your shoes dirty and stay on that trail, because as that trail expands, it's sort of encroaching on that natural space on either side and impacting the plant life and possibly the animal life that inhabit that area. So I encourage you to, again, plan ahead and prepare, wear some shoes that you're not afraid to get dirty, and go ahead and keep on that trail through that mud puddle. Another one I want to talk about is that third principle of dispose of waste properly. And so some of you may have heard the sort of phrase, pack it in, pack it out. And so the idea here is anything you bring in with you should come out with you. And this should include, not just the people that you potentially go hiking with, or, your dog that you want to bring hiking. Like obviously you want to bring those things home. But this should extend to, any wrappers for snacks that you have, even things that are organic material like banana peels, orange peels, apple cores. Yes, those are biodegradable. They are natural organic material, but they are not inherently endemic to the area that you are in. And so those sorts of things can be not only unsightly, but they can harm certain animals that live in those areas that might encounter that and be like, ooh, this smells good. I'm going to try this out. And so another piece of this that connects with what we're doing and what we're experiencing right now is some of these parks in different areas that have typically available trash cans and different receptacles in certain places may not be staffed enough to keep those empty with the number of folks recreating in those areas right now. And so being prepared to bring home anything that you might have originally planned to throw away in a trash bin or recycling bin is a good way to plan. And so that can be as simple as bringing a plastic grocery bag in your backpack so you can toss stuff in there. So if you're worried about getting, banana peel, nastiness all over the inside of your backpack, you can just toss it in that grocery bag or Ziploc bag, and then feel free to dispose of it as you please once you get home. And another piece of this disposing of waste properly is also human waste. And so thinking about when and how you use the bathroom, and how if nature calls when you're in nature, how you're going to take care of that. And so understanding that using the facilitaries, as some of us like to call them, is possible, and it's not as scary as it may sound, but it does take some preparation. And so I'm not going to dive too deeply into that right now. There are resources on Leave No Trace's website, but in general, it's good to prepare for this and understand sort of what the safe ways are to use the bathroom in the woods if you need to. But I would say, again, the go before you go idea is sort of the simplest way to prevent this, especially if you're not going to be out for a long extended period of time. Sort of just try to take care of that before you head out into the woods. And then quickly, I want to touch on Principle 6 and Principle 7. And so the idea of respecting wildlife and being considerate of other visitors. And so it makes me think of a recent experience I had out on a trail, and I saw some folks on the edge of the trail as I was approaching, and I was trying to figure out kind of what they were doing. One of them had a stick and was sort of poking into this low shrub. And I was saying to myself, man, I hope they're not like poking at an animal or a snake or something like that. And sure enough, as I passed them, they said, oh, look, there's a little snake in this bush if you want to check it out. And so this example I like to give in this situation is picture yourself sitting at home, reading a book or watching TV, just kind of hanging out. And all of a sudden, some strange person walks into your house and you've never seen them before. They didn't knock or ring the doorbell, but they just start kind of perusing your bookshelves. They go in and they check your fridge. They want to see what you have in there. And then all of a sudden they just come over to you and they just start, just tapping you on the head. not aggressively, but just ever so slightly tapping you on the head. And you're thinking to yourself, what's happening right now? This is making me uncomfortable. I'm getting nervous. Who's this person in my house? And so this is an example I like to give of us going out and recreating in nature and realizing that we are in the home of other animals. And, they can get stressed out in situations like that too. And so just if you encounter a snake or, different critters, squirrels, chipmunks, you're bound to see something out there. But just try to keep that respectful distance, enjoy them from afar, try to snap a photo from afar if you would like to. But one thing that Leave No Trace talks about in terms of trying to stay respectful, at a respectful distance from these animals is what they call the rule of thumb. And so if you can, put your arm out, extend your arm all the way and hold your thumb up and try to cover that animal. If you can cover the animal with your thumb, you're at a safe distance. So you're good. You can take a photo. You can observe sort of what they're doing. But if you see a substantial portion of that animal around your thumb from that far away, you're a little close, and you should probably try to move on by them so that you're not going to stress them out any more than they need to be. And so knowing that that's the case, most of these encounters you have with wildlife are generally friendly and uneventful, but just trying to be careful and considerate when encountering these other species out while you're recreating. And so I want to kind of wrap up a little bit with this respecting others. And so there's a lot of pieces to this, this principle. And the main focus is generally, though, keeping in mind that other folks are out in the areas you're recreating as well. And generally, folks are getting out there to not necessarily run into other groups of hikers or bikers or campers. A lot of times people are looking for some isolation or some quiet time or trying to connect with nature. And so understanding that different people are out there for different reasons. And if you want to jam out to your favorite, Spotify playlist as you're hiking down the trail, that's cool. Just pop in some earbuds. That way you're not cranking up that wireless speaker and everyone within 300 yards can hear you singing your way down the trail. And in this current situation, just thinking about allowing a safe distance between yourself and others if you pass them on the trail or in the parking lot, and trying to find areas that aren't overcrowded to try to get outside and recreate. And we know, as Dan mentioned, this can be a challenge, but thinking about if you go somewhere and it looks overcrowded, maybe trying to pick another access area. And also, as Olivia mentioned, one of the partners for this series is Purple Lizard Maps, and they have great resources that you can use to try to find more off the beaten path areas to try to access the outdoors, whether you're looking for a trailhead or a lake or somewhere to go fishing, whatever it might be. But I would encourage you to go out and get one of those maps and use that to try to find some space that you can find a quiet area outdoors. And knowing that if you are going to recreate in an area that is crowded or highly used, take the proper precautions, because you may put yourself and those you're with just in a situation where you may end up in closer quarters with some folks than you feel comfortable with. So if you want to, bring a mask and bring hand sanitizer and whatever else you might want that will help you feel more comfortable, that sort of connects back to that principle number one of planning ahead and preparing. But just being aware that a lot of people are going out and recreating nowadays because there's not a lot of other things to go and do. And so it's a great way to, get some fresh air and get out of the house and explore some areas around you. And so those are just a few key concepts that I wanted to hit on, and then try to connect to our current situation. And like I said, there's a ton of detail and information that you can dive into with these principles on the Leave No Trace website. They have a lot of helpful resources. There's a variety of books and online publications and things like that that you can dig into that I can provide some information on. And they also have a great YouTube channel with some short videos that provide good context and sort of teachable moments for some of these ideas that are pretty engaging. And so one last thing I did want to share with you all is as DCNR has been updating their protocols and things like that, with our current situation, Leave No Trace has also been doing that. And so they recently just put out this document with sort of like, it's not the 7 principles, but it's sort of 7, playing on that 7 number, 7 things to remember when you're recreating in our current pandemic situation. And so again, I'll provide a link to this online, but this sort of just kind of brings everything together and touches on some points that have become more relevant than maybe prior to our current situation. And I just want to say a lot of what Leave No Trace talks about in a lot of ways can be common sense. And so sometimes it just takes that extra moment of thinking about, you know, how to prepare and are these the places I should go? Are these the way I should interact with the world around me? Things like that. And what Leave No Trace is trying to do is just provide some guidance and support for folks when trying to recreate and leave the world a better place. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions any of you might have. And I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Drew. Yeah, all of those points are very important to consider while we're getting outside during this time. I know that I've certainly encountered a couple of people that weren't following Leave No Trace, so it's important that it's a group effort and we're keeping our natural spaces as clean and as clear from all of our impact as we can. And like Drew said, he's going to send me a couple of links to include in the follow-up Facebook page, so all of the information that he just shared can get out to all of you, so make sure you check for that follow-up post when we're done. Yeah, so now after hearing both of those presentations, I want to open it up to questions from the Zoom room and also from Facebook Live. So if you're watching here or on Facebook, so if you're in Zoom, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. If you're on the Facebook Live, go ahead and put it in the comments, and Megan here is going to send those over to us so we can bring those questions into the room as well. So with that being said, if you have a question for Dan or for Drew, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that question. Well, I guess you guys might have done a great job with your presentations if there's no question.
Yeah, we're that good. Yeah.
You're that good. Oh, we have one in the comments here. Okay, so they asked me to read it for them. It says, Drew, you mentioned that we should stick to the familiar trails and activities, but there are always risks associated with outdoor recreation no matter how prepared we are. Is there a protocol to get out of the unforeseen situation or the best way to seek help or assistance with the least amount of contact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I agree, there are always inherent risks. And so that's part of that sort of planning ahead and preparing. One thing I would always recommend doing is letting someone who's not going with you know where you're going and what you'll be doing, and give them a worry time. And so when I say worry time, I don't necessarily mean the time you intend to be home. So if you're planning an activity and you want to go for a hike and you hope to be home at 4 p.m., maybe your worry time should be 8 p.m. Because if you tell someone 4 p.m. and you get home at 4:15, they might be worried that you're 15 minutes past. But you want to give them that sort of time that gives you some buffer in case you end up taking longer than you expected. So one thing is definitely having folks know where you're going so that if you run into trouble, they could send someone in to help. Another thing I would say is packing a good, simple first aid kit. So if you have a minor injury or something like that on a trail, you would have things like bandages, gauze, perhaps an ACE bandage, things like that that could help you get out of an unfortunate situation and then seek more assistance once you're off the trail. And a couple other things, just like bringing a mask with you, having gloves, things like that, in case you do end up needing assistance from someone on the trail. You can try to stay as physically distanced as possible, but you could take some of those other precautions in terms of personal protective equipment or things like that. So yeah, there's no perfect answer or way to be completely and 100% prepared when you're going out into the wilderness. But just maybe some of those small things could help you out if something like that were to happen. Hopefully that sort of answers your question.
Great, thank you, Drew. Yeah, that question was from Anushka. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. She said thanks for your answer. We also have another question coming in from Facebook from Madison. Again, for Drew, it says, what is the most difficult principle of leave no trace to teach? What principle is most commonly not followed?
That's a tough one. I think it varies by audience and by the location that you're in and things like that. And so I don't think that it's hard to pick one. I think they all have their challenges for different reasons. One, a couple of the ones that I touched on in terms of like having folks walk through the muddy trails, that's generally one that it's not really hard, but it's one that people have trouble getting on board with because they're so conditioned to like, oh, there's a big mud puddle, I'll walk around it. And so in some senses, it's sort of breaking down those preconceived notions of like, if you're walking down a sidewalk and there's a big puddle, unless, you're like a 7-year-old, you're probably not going to splash your way through that puddle. You go around it. And so some of it is like that. Sometimes there's the idea of trying to break down the fact that the organic material is, not something that we can just throw in the woods, and encourage them to bring those things out. And then, I don't know. I know it's kind of like a non-answer now because I can't pick just one. But I think that the biggest thing that I always try to do with folks, if I'm hitting a roadblock with teaching them a tough principle, is to try to find that level that you can engage with them and make it matter to them why that principle is actually important. And so whether that's better understanding how they interact with the outdoors and what's important to them in that setting, or where they're from and what their background is, and understanding sort of maybe why they have approached things the way they have in the past. So yeah, I don't know if that's sort of answers part of your question. I know I didn't pick one principle, so I'm sorry for that.
No, I think that's fine. Thank you for working through that, Drew. Are there any questions from the Zoom room? Anyone that wants to unmute themselves? Just want to make sure we're not skipping over anyone. I actually have a question going off of what you just said, Drew, and for Dan as well. It's been on my mind recently, just thinking about more of the high adventure activities like rock climbing, mountain biking, swiftwater boating, and how this aligns with the leave no trace principle of like staying on sturdy ground or familiar trails. And maybe Dan, I don't know if you've thought through this at all with your programs, if you're kind of staying on the safe side, doing very family-friendly activities when you're going out on these guided tours, but how should we be approaching these more high-risk situations, especially for people that feel like they're very confident in their skills and going out and being on their own? Is that something that we should still be avoiding? I don't know if either of you have insight on that. I know that there's probably not a right answer in that situation.
Well, apparently Drew has taken the extremely safe route and left. So, so I will answer. DCNR has provided some guidance on those topics. Early on, they definitely encourage people to go more towards the safe route, more kind of focused on if you're going to be outside, don't do anything crazy because we just don't have staff to respond if you get hurt. And that's probably still mostly the case for a lot of the areas in red. The areas in yellow that right now, they do have most of their park staff back, but now is still not the best time to go out and.
Oh, Dan, you got muted.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
About staff being back and being wary of going out. Yes.
Yeah. So the the staff are coming back slowly over time as we move from yellow to green. Right now, there's maybe 2/3 the staff that are available to respond to an incident if something happens. So if you do get hurt out there, it might be, 6 or 7 hours before someone can actually come out and find you. So those are the considerations to have whenever you're making that 20-foot jump off a cliff.
Sorry, my internet booted me off right as you were asking that question, Olivia. So I'm happy to weigh in, but I did not actually hear it.
I was muted that time. Yeah, I was just asking, it's been on my mind recently, these more high adventure activities like rock climbing, mountain biking, swiftwater boating, all of those activities, and how, especially what Dan talked a bit about, how when we were in red phase, they were strongly advising people against doing those activities because there wasn't really staff to go out and look for people that get in trouble. But now that we're moving more towards yellow phase, should we still be avoiding these activities? And I'm thinking specifically about people that feel confident in their own skills going out and doing that on their own. I don't know if that should be something that we're doing during this time.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that the answer, there's no 100% answer. So an example is I'm an avid mountain biker, and I have been biking substantially throughout this whole experience, but I've been very intentional about where I choose to go and what trails I'm choosing to ride and who I'm telling and all of those types of things. And so I think it just comes down to trying to stay more within your comfort zone rather than pushing your boundaries maybe as you might. I've been riding generally less challenging, closer to home trails. There's trail systems sort of in and around town that I know that I have cell service, and if something were to happen, someone I know could come and help me, not in that, it wouldn't take them that long to get to me. And so I think keeping that in mind, and if you're rock climbing is a tough one because I feel like generally those locations are more remote, and you have to be in closer contact with another person if you're doing it. And so if you don't have a fellow rock climber in your pod right now with whom you've been quarantining with, that could be a little bit tougher. And so I think it takes some more intentionality than perhaps it used to. And it's definitely, I would say, not a time to start one of these hobbies if you've never done it before. So it's not a 100% answer, but definitely be cautious and look before you leap is sort of a good way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with both of you. You kind of touched on how there's not really a 100% answer for that right now, with a lot of other things too. So I think that erring on the side of caution, being more cautious with your trail choice or location is definitely the way to go in that situation. I have a question from Claudia on Facebook. We touched on this a bit, but I don't know if you have anything else to add. She's saying that she's finding that there are many people out hiking and recreating that making outdoor spaces crowded. So what do you suggest to find less crowded places to visit? Either of you can answer that question.
Well, that'll get into the series of books that I have to recommend later. So I'll let Drew take that.
Yeah, I think in some senses it takes some trial and error, but I think it's also knowing maybe from this conversation or from some of Dan's resources, trying to figure out which trailhead and access areas are the more common ones. And so, for those of us in the State College area, Shingletown Gap, Musser Gap, and the Galbraith Gap lot are typically very frequented access areas. And so trying to maybe find some other locations that you could access various trails and things like that. And so, like I said, Purple Lizard maps are great resources for looking at the whole forest and seeing what your options are. I look forward to hearing what Dan's recommendations are. But there's also, there's a variety of resources in terms of hiking hiking guides and things like that that can help you find those areas. And it's also sometimes thinking about it through a different lens of like, okay, this is traditionally where I've gone because it's easy and I know that people go there and someone else showed me that. But there's a lot of other less frequented areas. Like I know, the Arboretum, a lot of people have been walking through the Arboretum at Penn State, but it also connects to this system of fields. And there's a lot of other trails that are back in the woods around that area that are used much less frequently. And having spent some time back there recently, I have encountered very few people. And so I think that trying to think of some more unorthodox ways to access things that aren't inherently, a state park or a typically accessed area in a state forest. Sounds like Dan might have some more specific answers about those locations though, so.
Yeah, like Dan said, he sent me over a list of books that he's going to recommend a little bit later. So I think we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll allow Dan to talk about those books that we could be able to reference later for some of these questions as well. But we also had a similar question in the chat box that goes off of this is with the crowded areas, those are often the trailheads that are within 15 minutes from our home. So if we find that all of those locations within 15 minutes are crowded, is it worth going outside of those 15 minutes, or should we still stick within those recommendations, or which side of the argument should we be going with in that situation? And that's from Kelly in the chat box. Again, this might not have a right answer.
Now, I will say, as a person who lives in the middle of the woods, 15 minutes from my house gets me absolutely nowhere. 15 minutes basically gets me to a major road. So for me to find a trail within 15 minutes of my house is nigh impossible. I can get to Black Moshannon in 20 minutes. I can get to State College in 20 minutes. But 15 minutes doesn't get me a trail. So that 15 minutes is more or less a guideline to limit the travel that people are partaking in. So in my case, I'm not traveling to Union County to go down the Laurel Highlands hiking trail. I'm going to be hiking in Rothrock and in the Moshannon State Forest, the ones that are closer to my home. And I think that's more in the spirit of what that 15 minutes is advising. It's not a hard and fast rule like you're going to get arrested if a police officer finds you more than 15 minutes from your house. It's more so to keep people from moving a community spread area to another community spread area and that kind of thing. So you're unlikely to run into a scenario where that's going to be truly impactful. And also with like the bridge closes over, Bear Meadows, getting to areas in the Rothrock that would have been 10 minutes are now 35 minutes. So it's a soft guideline. It's not really a hard and fast rule. Use your best judgment, I guess, is what I would say there.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of those similar ideas. And then I think another thing is just ensuring that you're comfortable with where you're going and how to get there and how to get back out, I think is the key as well. So whether that's having a map or going to places you've been before, making sure your car has enough gas, those types of things is important to think about as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so next we have a question from Rachel on Facebook. She says, while hiking recently, I've seen quite a few people wearing face masks on the trail. Aside from maintaining an appropriate distance from others, has Leave No Trace released any guidelines regarding using a mask while recreating?
So I've not seen anything specific about masks. I think it's sort of what I've heard in general from a variety of different areas in terms of recreating or exercising with a mask on. I think it's a little bit of your personal preference and what amount of people you think you're going to encounter and how comfortable you feel in those situations. So granted, trying to get your heart rate up and go for a trail run or go biking with a mask on could inhibit your breathing ability, which certainly would make things tough. And so just being aware of your surroundings, and if you think you're going to be in a remote area, I don't think you necessarily need to wear one, but if you feel like you're in a crowded access area and then you're going to be able to sort of escape the crowd once you hit the trail, you could certainly wear one in the parking lot as you get ready to go. And then if you want to and you'd be more comfortable, you could remove it while you're on the trail and then, put it back on when you get to the parking lot, things like that. And so I think it's more of a personal preference and how proximate you feel like you're going to be to those other people.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people out with masks as well and was wondering the same sort of question. So it's good to have some clarification on that. There is a question from Sandy in the chat box. It says, how do you feel about the signage and worn footpaths in the local community recreation areas and hiking trails with regard to leave no trace? Also signage placed on hiking trails.
I'm not 100% sure I know exactly what you're trying to get at, Sandy. I don't know if you could clarify slightly, or I could just take a stab at it. Just want to make sure I'm getting to the spirit of your question.
Just reading the question, I think that Sandy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking with signage as far as like blazes of trails, and is there enough to allow people to be following the right paths in these, especially high volume recreation areas? Is there enough for them to follow leave no trace? That's how I interpreted the question.
I see. Okay. I think trailblazes are one of those. Signage and blazes are an interesting beast, because I feel like they vary so much depending on the area you're in, and so I think it's another one of those things that, if you've ever, for example, been on the Appalachian Trail, it's hard to see one blaze and not be able to see the next white blaze like where you're standing, because it's so well marked all the way through, versus a lot of areas around here are not like that. And so I think it's being cognizant and doing your best to follow the trail as best you can. I've definitely been on some areas on the Mid-State Trail around here where I am hunting for an orange blaze, and I think I know where the trail is, and I'm doing my best to follow what looks like the trail, but I don't know if it's the trail. And so again, as Dan said, with the 15-minute guideline, no one's going to come out and put you in handcuffs on the trail if you're doing your best to follow the blazes and you're having a hard time. And like I said, it's a common occurrence in certain areas around here that are less frequently used and get very overgrown and things like that. And there's definitely certain areas where the blazes are great and it's really easy to follow them, whether it's the orange blazes on the Mid-State or the other side trails that may be blue or red or whatever they might be. And so I think it's one of those situations where you do your best and you try to stay on what looks like the well-worn trail, even if you can't find the blaze. And then hopefully you're thinking like, oh man, I've been hiking for 10 minutes and I haven't seen a blaze. I wonder if I'm lost. And then all of a sudden you see one and you feel so relieved. So trust me, I've been there too, and I know how it feels. And I always just try to do my best. And so I think that's the best recommendation I can give.
Thank you, Drew. And I think we have a question from Allison in the Zoom room as well. If Allison wants to unmute herself.
Sure. So this is just sort of an opinion question for both of you. I think one of the interesting things that's happened because of all this is that a lot of nature centers or a lot of things that would have been offered outside are now being offered in a creative way or virtually. And I think one of the nice things about this is that a lot more people are able to access it, and there might be a wider breadth of people that are seeing these programs. And I'm just wondering what you guys think about, after all of this has subsided a little bit, do you see these virtual programs as becoming a more commonplace thing that nature centers or various programs like that will continue to offer, or do you think they'll just kind of fall to the wayside and go back to purely outside programs.
You want to go first, Dan, or you want me to take it?
Go for it.
Um, I think it's both, honestly, because I agree. I think from my very personal experience for my job right now, as you know, Allison, I am trying to work with the Aurora team to redesign our backcountry backpacking experience, our orientation program for students, as a virtual experience. And so I think I'm learning things about what is possible through that medium. And I think in some senses, there's never going to be a complete substitute for being out in nature, out in the woods, and experiencing that. But I do think that some of these virtual platforms or programs that are developed could either provide a jumping off point for people who may be intimidated to just go outside right away, or it could also provide access to some folks who, for whatever reason, may not be able to engage with nature in the way that they want to right now or for the foreseeable future. And so I think, and I think this extends into a lot of different parts of society and what we're experiencing right now, in terms of learning what is possible virtually. But I think that it would be smart for these programs and institutions to try to stick with both of them a little bit, and sort of reap the benefits of both sides.
And jumping onto that, as someone who job it is to lead people in the outdoors personally, I can't do that right now. So, there's that balance of, well, I could just talk for 6 hours into a microphone, and that's basically what I would be doing. But there's something entirely different about telling people about what a hemlock looks like and what woolly adulgia does to it than it is to hand someone a desiccated branch that has little fuzzy bits on it. Those are two very different learning modes, and there will always be a place for, the online stuff, but I think, in my personal opinion, the nature-based, interactive education component is much more appealing to me as, a hands-on teacher than it is, telling people and showing images. I think moving forward, people are starting to realize just how much work goes into producing these kind of content pieces that go online. I would say it's actually harder to do a 5-minute presentation online that's cohesive and follows through on the things that you're looking to achieve than it is to take people on a 20-minute hike through a section of woods. And there's just so many more like touchy bits that you have to perform. Like, your audio quality has to be good. You can just talk louder when you're in the woods, like if someone can't hear you. Like, there are all these little considerations. Like, you don't know what people are going to be looking at your content on. So should you be formatting things for, a desktop use or for phone use? Like, these are all considerations that I don't think most of us have had before, because we're not content creators first. We're educators and outdoor leaders first. So those are the things we have to start to wrap our wet, mushy brains around and try to figure out as we move forward. But it's an exciting, and the opportunities are boundless.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do expect to see a mix of programming in the future, but being in an environmental field myself and teaching in the outdoors, I agree, Dan, that there's just something different about going back to in-person programming. So hopefully that comes very soon. But like I said, I think that we'll see a mix of programming in the future. I don't see any more questions coming in. I'll just pause for a second to see if there's anyone in the Zoom room that has the last question. No? Okay. Well, I know that Dan has some books that he'd like to share with us that we can use as resources as we move forward when we don't have the opportunity to ask a person a question right away. So maybe there's some books that we can reference. So go ahead, Dan, share those books with us, and I will link those again in the follow-up Facebook post. So look out for that information where you can find these books. So go ahead, Dan.
All right. So in honor of your lovely sponsor, the Webster's Bookstore and Cafe and Tiger Eye resources, these are going to be a series of books that I find personally fascinating and help helped me kind of formulate the basis of some of my outdoor activities. Going in descending size order, because I have no better way to organize them. The outdoor parents, outdoor kids, and I realize these are probably in mirror view because that's how cameras work on the internet now. So you can't actually read it. But Outdoor Parents, Outdoor Kids is a fascinating book. It goes into a lot of detail about how to interact in the outdoors, teach your kids various activities, what kind of activities are good for kids, and kind of the steps you through some of the processes. There's also some really fun illustrations in it. It's a good book. I like it a lot. Moving down, if you are looking for places to hike, I cannot recommend more the 50 Hikes series. Tom Thwaites wrote a number of them. The 50 Hikes in Central Pennsylvania is obviously the most, appropriate one for us here in Central Pennsylvania. This one is the 1979 version. It's in red. The more modern ones, I think, are green. Not much has changed between the ones that were published more recently in the 79 version. The 79 version one just has more of Tom's pictures in it, I think. So they're really good resources. Tom is an excellent author. He is actually the designer and originator of the Midstate Trail, as is, like 75% of the trails in Rothrock. You can go visit his stone that's up on the little flat tower area. It's really, really a nice place. On the same vein, in local authors talking about locations that are cool, you have Jean Aaron's The Short Hiker, which is a bunch of really nice short hikes. The Jean Aaron Path in Bear Meadows, for example, based off of her writing and her in general. Really, really interesting authors. A lot more stories in that one than there are guides, but also a good one. There's Kids Love Pennsylvania, which, interestingly enough, I've only ever been able to find outside of Pennsylvania. So I don't know why we don't stock it in most of the places throughout Pennsylvania, but this is another one. Some of the things in here are not terribly applicable at the moment, like some of the festivals that they talk about, probably not going to be happening this summer. But there are a lot of fun, socially distanced locations that you can visit in this book, a lot of historical locations. Locate things like dams and whatnot that are kind of has some history and touchstone points that you can take kids out to kind of explore those regions. And then moving into the more informative books, kind of along the Leave No Trace principles, is the Soft Paths Knowles outdoor book. It is a fun book that it's Leave No Trace without the kind of LNT branding. Soft Paths is basically the Knowles philosophies on the Leave No Trace principles. It's not broken down into the 7, but it has, the classic Knowles quality built into it. So it's a really interesting read. And then the last one, also a Knowles book, which I enjoy greatly, is Wilderness Ethics. Basically it's the history of what the Knowles principles are for responsible recreation and kind of how that works going forward and how we can balance our recreation needs with the needs for conservation. A really fascinating read. I embrace them all greatly.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing those with us, Dan. Like I said before, I will be linking all of those books to our follow-up Facebook post that will be going out at some point today. And like Dan said, we'd love to support our local businesses. So I will also link our partner, Webster's Bookstore and Cafe, their online store. I checked before the session and at least some of those titles are available on Webster's. So if you plan on ordering one of them, I encourage you to order it from Webster's if you are able to. And to thank our other partners, Clearwater Conservancy, which is with us today, and Purple Lizard Maps, which we talked about a bit during our session too. Go ahead and follow their Facebook page. Like we said, there are lots of suggestions to find less crowded areas to go on these hikes. And then also buy a Purple Lizard Maps. They're awesome. I use them all the time. So it's good to have those on hand. I want to say a special thanks to Dan and Drew for joining us today. There was tons of great information, and I'm sure that everyone feels at least a bit more confident going out and taking advantage of that natural spaces that we have around us. So thank you so much. In just a moment, I am going to end the Facebook live stream. So thank you all if you're watching on Facebook for joining us. The stream will be on our Facebook page. So if you haven't watched it, or if you want to go back and watch it, you can do that too. But I'm going to end that. But anyone that is on the Zoom room, if you could stick around for just a moment, I do have a poll to go out just to get some feedback. If you are on Facebook and you want to give some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, or anyone can send an email to shaverscreekhns@gmail.com. I will put that in our Facebook page as well to put out. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. This was a really great session, and I would love to see you all again in the future. Next week, we have our last Human Nature Series session of the season, and it is featuring world-renowned nature writer Richard Louv, and that'll be streaming through WPSU, so watch out for information on that. It'll be on our website and on our Facebook page very soon. Great. Dan and Drew, do you have any closing remarks before I end that Facebook live stream?
Well, thanks for joining us, and have fun and be careful outside.
Yep, same here. Have fun.
Great, thank you. Like I said, I'm going to end the Facebook live stream now. If you're over there, thank you so much for watching. All right. So if you are here in the Zoom room still, I'm about to send out the poll. It's just a couple of questions about the session today. Most of them are yes or no, so they shouldn't take too long. But I will send that out now. Please share your responses. And then it was lovely seeing you all. You can log off after that. Thank you. Great. All right. All right, as you're finishing up your poll, like I said, this is the end of the session. Thank you so much for coming. It was great to have a nice group and really great questions asked. Yeah, if you're interested, go ahead and join another session, but you can log off of this one when you are done with the poll. Dan and Drew, thank you again so much for joining us. It was super informative, really great questions and information going out. And I think that we covered a huge amount of information, and I know that I at least learned something during this session. So I think that it was really great to have you both here. Good to have different viewpoints as well. Great. Well, I'll be putting out that follow-up post later. So Dan, I think I have your links, and I copied the ones that you put in the chat as well. And then Drew, if you want to send those over when you can, I'll get out that post at some point today.
Okay. I think the ones that I posted in the chat, and then I just sent you one more. I think that's probably a good start, and then folks can navigate from there through the Leave No Trace website and that stuff. So it should be
Great.
good.
So you just want me to include those ones, and then we'll be good with your stuff?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Should be good. Thanks.
Thank you both so much. This was great. All righty.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Bye. Great, that was fun. I'm going to share the poll results with you guys, and I'm going to record them. Results.
I wonder what the other is for how they heard about it.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I feel like that's every possible,
Right?
yeah, or like a combination of two. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see.
Megan and I were both saying that Dan's job sounds awesome.
What's that?
Megan and I were both saying that Dan's job sounds amazing.
Oh my God, it does.
Right. I mean, I kind of researched, but I didn't really realize how many things they do.
I know. They do so much. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Wow, everyone enjoyed it and would recommend and all that stuff.
Yay.
Um,
Do you know if you'll, for the format for next week, will you be able to send the poll out?
I'm not sure. I'm meeting with WPSU at some point early this week.
Right.
I would like to have a poll. Great if we could have an open-ended question. I mean, I guess I could also send out that email address. I haven't gotten any responses from yesterday's session, so I don't know if anyone's taking advantage of that or planning to send any suggestions or oh, someone said Olivia's mic quality could use improvement. Is it breaking up?
I thought
No?
it did fine.
I thought it did fine. Okay. I'll have to look into that.
The poll, I can look into the Qualtrics is what my stepmom uses when she does like really big webinars.
Okay.
And it should be more diverse. I can look into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll ask WPSU if we could do Qualtrics or if they have their own format doing it, something like that. But I think that sending out a poll is very useful, at least for our internal use. Great. Do we feel like we covered everything? I feel like my conclusion was kind of short, but I can't think of anything that I didn't include.
I think it was good, yeah. We talked about next week, getting in touch.
Cool. I think today went really well. I was kind of nervous when there wasn't any questions coming in.
I know.
We're just going to sit here.
Kelly or Tommy, I know you're out there. Someone's got to have
Somebody
Yeah.
asked a question. So I was glad that there were some coming in. It was nice to have some from Facebook too.
Yeah.
Great. I think that yesterday, I don't know if people knew that they should ask questions because I just mentioned it on at the very beginning. So you wouldn't know. So I'm glad that after I said it during the question and answer, or I also put it in the little blurb that people asked questions. But I think we covered so much. There was so much information shared, and it was all very helpful.
I didn't realize, like Dan, Trew, and Drew, like those names, trying to keep track of them.
Oh my God. Well, so this workshop was supposed to have Dan, Drew, and Dave from Purple Lizard Map.
Oh, no.
But, yeah. But yeah, I think this went really well. Yeah, I really don't know what the format exactly is going to be for next week.
Yeah.
I'll update it on that. But as far as these sessions like this was the last one for now, unless we do that this summer. But I think that it went really smoothly. I mean, both of them did. I feel like after yesterday, today went pretty well. There weren't as many bumps, but oh, I need to save these. Cat. I have Drew's link. All right, well, I think Good work, everyone. Thank you so much for the stream and the Slack coming up with those discussion questions. I know that we didn't use them, but thank you so much for preparing those in case we needed them. They were all great questions too, but it was also good to hear a lot of questions from the audience. So, alrighty, thank you so much.
Okay.
This was fun. See you later.
Yeah.
Bye.